Ebonie, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I want to thank our mutual friend, Maria Elisa Iyerbe, for connecting us and bringing us together here today. Where did you grow up?
So I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee, just north of Mississippi. It's right there in this a bit of a tri-state area. So it's Tennessee, Mississippi, Arkansas is right there as kind of a northern point of the Delta region. And it's like a mid-south. So it's south, but it's also somewhat Midwest, like kind of like mid-south. So it was a great place to grow up. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, tell me about that. What role did music play in your upbringing? And was there a technology influence in there as well?
I wouldn't say there was a huge technology influence outside of the radio and basic speaker playback equipment. Obviously, at the time, it was the 90s, so the tapes were still very present and the CDs were very present, and there was radio. And that was probably the extent of my technological understanding at that point. I didn't really get into studio work until college. And that was great because there was an influence. I was always very attracted and mesmerized by the radio. I always dreamed of having a song on the radio. That was just such a big deal for me. And also growing up in church was a major musical influence as well.
When you say the radio is a point of fascination, was it the technology itself of, hey, this is coming from another place, or was it just the technology itself of, oh, this is cool, there's a radio, there's sound coming out of it? What part of that intrigued you?
I didn't have enough understanding to think through broadcast and transmission as a scientific concept. I really didn't learn very much about telecommunications or radio transmissions once again until I got to grad school and college. But as far as the radio just seemed to be equated with some form of artistic and creative success. If you were on the radio, it meant that you were a big deal. Like even if you were local artists, to get played on the radio was just, it was magical, but it also was emblematic of some sort of success in music. And because the famous people were on the radio, right? And also just simply because musically, at the very basic level, musically, I had a lot of passion for harmony, bands, instruments. And it was where I could hear those things all the time. It was a form of live performance that was recorded. And because otherwise I would have to go out to hear music or experience it, or I'd have to go to church to experience it. Through the radio, I could experience it 24/7. And I just loved being as close to music as I possibly could be. And radio was free broadcasting. So I didn't have to have money to go buy a tape or a CD. I was able to listen to all the popular songs for free on the radio.
Did you play an instrument in school at all?
Very young, I exhibited a capacity for piano playing. So my folks very quickly started with the piano lessons, and I did that for a while. But I eventually got very swept away in sports. So for the remainder of my high school and junior high school time, I played sports very seriously. And once I got to college, I picked my musical aspirations back up. So there was probably like a 10-year period of, all puns intended, radio silence on the music front. And then, picked it back up in college. So, but yeah, I did play. And I was just one of those type of people that could just play. I could just hear a song and play it. So in a way, you just take gifts like that for granted sometimes, because it just comes easy to you. So I stopped the piano lessons, but I continued to progress musically. I was still able to achieve and get better because it was just kind of a natural talent. But then once I got to college, I started taking it more seriously.
Did in going into college, did you get into college on any with like kind of a direction of sports or music, or was there something more academic that you were focused on?
Academic focus for sure. I'd spent a semester playing basketball, but realized I didn't want to play D1 ball. So I stopped playing basketball my first semester. And after that, it was just a pure focus on music, and not just music. I was more so interested in entertainment in general. At some point, I thought I might do something in the film and television space. And then I spent some time doing musical theater and eventually made my way back to music because my folks were fairly against the pursuit of music. So I was kind of looking for a way to do music without actually declaring that as a major, which is why I started kind of bouncing around looking for other entertainment avenues and other majors that could maybe give me that musical fix that I needed without having to declare that as a major. So, because my folks were just not having it. And it wasn't until I put my foot down that, it took some years, but eventually by my junior year, I put my foot down and started taking music classes.
So when you were in college, you're saying that they basically were like, no, don't major in music. Don't study that. Study something else.
Exactly. So my mother said, you cannot. Right. So I was like, Mom, I want to take music class. She said, no. My family was very focused on the math and science, and the goal was for me to become a doctor or a lawyer. So the arts were fairly forbidden, maybe as like a minor, but like not as a major. And so I was trying to find a different kind of major to do for a very long time. And eventually, by my junior year, I just settled on, I started taking music classes at the Computer Music Center at Columbia University, and decided on an Africana Studies degree, which gave me what I wanted, an avenue to continue to do music because Africana Studies was so multidisciplinary. So I baked the music into that major.
You snuck it in, didn't you?
Snuck it in there. Yeah.
Wow. Interesting. Well, I'm curious, you played piano, but then you really got into sports. And as you got into college, you've got this directive from your mother saying, don't study. I don't want you to study music. Was part of this rebellion on your part? And that's the first part of the question. The second part of the question would be, what switch in your brain flipped to say, this is something I need to get into, regardless of what my mother says?
Right. It was the adding of the technological component. That was a selling point. Once I realized that you could combine computer science, music, and mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, and they could all exist in one space, it held my attention. Because like I told you before, I started studying music very young. There was a reason I ditched it for basketball. Being a pianist did not hold my attention at all. That was not the driving factor. It's still not the sole driving factor, even though I play for hours every day now. It's still not the driving factor. The driving factor is being the greatest possible producer I can be. And having the piano as the backbone of my musical life as a producer is what drives the playing now, right? Yeah. So the component that was missing was the technology component, which in effect was more of a challenge. It was more of a challenge than just playing piano. And it also got me closer to this dream of maybe having a song on the radio, because that's how you get there. Like, you get there from recordings. So I started getting very much into the technical aspects of record making, and actually had a campus job for 4 years at my college, at Barnard College, as an audio visual tech. And I had to get a work study job when I started my freshman year. And it was the only job that seemed interesting. And it was really an engineering job. And I was responsible for being the audio tech support for campus lectures, for, campus musical performances. And so I learned a lot about mics and consoles and just basic audio science. And that was very great. And through this job, I also learned about how to use recording equipment. And in the very beginning, it was just like really basic field recorders. So I started checking out field recorders to make recordings because I was still writing compositions in my spare time. So I wanted to record those compositions. And, I didn't know anything about multi-track recording or anything. And I was just checking out the audio equipment that we had as a part of my job. And that really led me down the much larger path, because I just remember thinking intuitively, this is primitive what I'm doing. I was like checking out field recorders that had like 2 inputs. And I was just like, there's gotta be a more sophisticated way. I've seen like studios and pictures. There's gotta be more to this than like setting up a couple of mics and recording piano. And that's where the curiosity started.
So there's definitely a part of your brain that gravitates toward the technical.
100%. It's just not as interesting just being a singer, right? Because, and I guess maybe it's just simply because I'm such a tomboy at heart, it just seemed like too simple almost. It's like just being a singer or just being a instrumentalist. I was like, there's gotta be something a little bit more interesting here. And once the technology was merged with just the musical performance aspect, I was sold after that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know how that is. It kind of lights your brain on fire a bit at the possibilities. Yeah. Well, take me through the college years, and how I'm just, as a parent, especially of a new, I just dropped my kid off at college this past week, my oldest. And I'm really curious about the path through college, the relationship that, and perspective that your mother started to see, like, oh, wait a minute, she's doing this other stuff. I'm sure she was like, I don't think Ebonie's becoming a doctor.
No, it's funny. I spent every summer at Phillips Academy studying math and science. I was a pre-med. We had a health sciences program in my high school. I was the president of my biomedical debate team. Every summer, I went to Andover, studied physics, calculus, chemistry, statistics. I studied the humanities too, every summer of high school. So you have to understand, my parents had invested deeply in this vision of me perhaps becoming a physician. My mother worked in the medical field. I had 24-hour access to the doctors that she worked for. Had a number of doctors in my family. One of my cousins, who's a doctor, actually wanted me to go to Xavier. She said, "We'll pay for your college. If you want to be a doctor, let's figure it out." So it's not a matter of a lack of exposure, right? Or the inability. And once I got to Barnard, I was recruited by the chemistry department to be a chemistry major because I had high marks coming in. And on some of my testing that I did over the summer, I scored quite high. And I was coming straight off of AP chemistry from high school and AP physics and all of that. So it was more, I think it was more in my parents' estimation, it was more of a kind of like lost investment in a way. I think they viewed it as, why are you starting completely over? We have this mind for math and science. Why are you starting completely over? And I don't think they understood that I was really just transferring skills, because so much of that math and science and physics still applies. It's completely applicable to audio engineering and the audio sciences. Once I started learning about wave science, obviously all the trigonometry came back, and all the circumference science and everything I learned about, in trigonometry. And so it was not like a lost science, but they weren't able to make the connection, and it's not easy to make. So once I got to school, I spent 2 years just trying to figure it out and eventually just put my foot down. And it wasn't in your words, it wasn't a rebellion as much as I just had to do it. It's just nothing else spoke to me in the same way that the music did. And I had to figure out how to make it work because it was all I wanted to do. After I figured out how much passion I had for it, it was nothing else that I wanted to do.
Yeah, it's strange when it consumes you like that, when it's, we feel that passion to be involved on that level. Clearly you figured it out, or you figured some aspects of it out. I know it's always a work in progress for all of us, but
for sure.
But what was the end result? Like, what did you end up getting your degree in, and and I don't mean to get psychological on you, but in the end, after leaving college, were your parents like, okay, we'll tolerate this? What happened there?
Okay, well, to answer the first question, I ended up getting my degree in Africana Studies with a focus in music technology. And then I graduated and went to NYU and got a master's in music technology and spent a bit of time as a production assistant at the Clive Davis Institute at Tisch while getting a master's in music technology from the Steinhardt School. So that was the extent of my musical training. I also studied music for a little bit in West Africa and Cameroon at the University of Yaoundé 1. After that, I started working. As far as my parents and where they are now and how that journey happened, I think that my folks just tolerated it. They just tolerated the music. I think my mother is still learning how to support the decision that I've made. I'm still not entirely sure that I can't really speak for her, but I guess I'm not entirely sure that she fully understands or appreciates what I do, but I think she's proud of the accomplishments.
Yeah.
And I think that she sees that, but I don't know that there's that much of an interest in what it is that I actually do, or even a curiosity around it. But there is definitely some pride surrounding the things that I've done, the things I've worked on, and the things I've been able to accomplish. And I think she's able to take cues from other people. Like she came to the Grammys with me last year, and I remember her saying to me something to the effect of, I didn't realize you were this person, right? Like, once she was just kind of seeing me in that space and interfacing with the people who, run the Recording Academy and the things that people would tell her about my work, she said, I just didn't know you were this person. And I think it's partly to do with the fact that being a recording engineer, producer is so behind the scenes. People rarely realize just how much producers and engineers do to make the music a reality for all of the public. The public can very easily take the fact that we have musical recordings and also music technology for granted. And in a way, that's a good thing, because it means that the industry behind music has made it so seamless and easy for the end user that people just assume that there's supposed to be music in the elevator when they get in it. They just assume that there's supposed to be music in the car. They just assume that you should be able to turn your phone on and play any record. But that's years and 100+ years of science and lots of audio professionals and creative professionals and a whole recording industry behind that. And it's anything but easy, but the average person doesn't realize that.
And your parents didn't have a musical background, did they? Other than maybe music in church, right?
Right. So I don't really think there's much of a musical tradition. Mm-hmm. We don't have I don't come from one of those families where everybody sings and everybody plays an instrument. It's quite the opposite. We have lots of doctors. We have lots of lawyers, so it's just we have athletes, quite a few athletes and successful ones, but not really a lot of musicians.
So it's easy, to understand like your mom's perspective, because she wasn't exposed to that. And then to come to the Grammys and like be like, oh, right, there's this whole other world of music makers that are doing things on a high level. And yeah, I get it. I get it for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so how did you make your way to Los Angeles, where you're talking to me from Los Angeles now?
I am.
Okay. How did you make your way to Los Angeles? What brought you there? What was connect the dots between, college and studying in Africa and doing all the educational things you did, eventually getting to Los Angeles?
So Los Angeles was a long journey, and I never would have thought, I mean, if you had asked me 3 years ago if I would be here, I would have told you, no way. I never thought I would live here, in spite of having so much family here, and, that's been here for decades. I never saw myself as a California resident. And I think COVID is the reason for this. I spent 17 years in New York and quite frankly thought I'd probably die there. I didn't think I was ever, I never thought I would leave New York City. It's still, to me, the greatest city in the world. 17 years there. During the pandemic, I left New York and I moved back to my hometown of Memphis, and I stayed there for, I guess, a year and a half while we were just kind of waiting for everything to open back up. And when everything did open up, I went back to New York, and I just had so much time away, and I had really adopted a completely different way of life. And, because when I moved to Memphis, I bought a house, I bought a car, I was living a completely different life than what I was used to in New York. And it just felt like, okay, how can I go back to this? And I didn't want to go back to the same thing. And I think the pandemic helped me realize that I needed a change of pace, kind of forced me into a change of pace. And so I reached out to my bosses, my two bosses at Atlantic. And I said, I was coming out to NAMM anyway. The whole team was coming out to the National Association of Music Merchants Conference in Anaheim. And so I said, I just want to stay. Is it okay if I just stay here? And I think they were both just like, hey, yeah, but you're going to have to chart your own course. You can move out and we'll transfer you. And after that, it was just me just really building out this latest phase of my job with Atlantic and really building it into what it is now.
In asking you about Los Angeles, I realize I've left out a huge chunk of time there. Let's backtrack a bit. How did you get to Atlantic? I guess is really the question. Like, how did that job come into play? And were there other things before that, internships or otherwise, that you did?
Okay, so Atlantic Records happened in 2013. I was looking for a job. I had a job. I wanted another job. I wanted something in the music business. And not even something in music business. I wanted something engineering and making records, like just anything engineering. I would have, I wanted to be in the studio as much as possible. And Atlantic had this entry-level position. At the time, it was just cutting up audio liners and helping out with the promotional assets. They needed an engineer to do very basic audio editing and very basic recording. And I was all over it, A lot of people were all over it. It was a very competitive position, and I did 3 interviews, and I ended up getting the job. It was a very, very basic entry-level position, but it came with a ton of flexibility. It was full-time, but it was a contractor role and allowed me to do some other things. And so that was really my foot in the door, and that was 2013. And I'm still there. And I just think through my work ethic and just my ingenuity and like creativity, I've been able to build the role into what it is now.
It's not the same role that it was in 2013.
No.
Okay.
So it started off as basic audio editing. It was great because I got a chance to do recordings and content with quite a bit of the roster. Even in some of those early times, I worked with Charlie XCX, doing content for her, and a lot of artists that have come and gone. A lot of artists that were legacy artists that would come in and out, like Sean Paul and Flo Rida. And, I was able to cut my teeth in an industry that is so coveted, doing, just being of service and helping with audio assistance. Mm-hmm. Then Atlantic built a proper studio and kept me on to help run it and to be the head engineer. And it was a studio in the office. It was built in 2014 to supplement the A&R department with session work. So they needed a staff engineer, and I became that staff engineer. And then the real projects started coming in. So Hamilton was one of the first projects that came in the door.
Hamilton cast recording?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow.
And that obviously opened the door to all types of other amazing recordings that started to come in. And I was, the engineer at bat, eventually starting to produce as well a little bit over that time. And then eventually I went to the head of A&R, Pete Gambarg, and pitched a incubator program to him that would allow me to do demo deals with artists and have them come in and use the studio, and I would produce them, and we would essentially be writing and producing songs that would hopefully get cut by our larger roster. I still do that. And then in the latest iteration of the role in this transformation is producing a poetry album that just came out 2 weeks ago. It was a Juneteenth poetry album that I did for the company. Before that, I did a holiday album for the company. So there are these kind of specialty albums that I've had an opportunity to do. Some of them I've spearheaded, others I've just produced them and brought them, finalized them and helped get them across the finish line as essentially an in-house producer. And obviously that has led to work outside of the company. I've had an opportunity to work on other things outside.
Wow. How did you think of the incubator program? How did that come about?
It taught me a lot about A&R. A&R is a very difficult job, and there's no playbook for it. So you have to find the right type of artist. They have to have a combination of things going for them, everything from obviously talent and creativity, but also they have to be willing to help themselves on the marketing front, right? You can't just deal with artists that don't want to promote and don't want to get on social media and try to activate their audience. And then there's the material, right? So it showed me that there's no replacing a great songwriter and identifying those persons. And I think through the incubator over the years, I've identified some incredible songwriters and some talented artists, but still really learning how to run that so that we have success with placements.
But that was your brainchild. That was your baby, this
Absolutely.
Incubator thing. And what made you think of that?
Well, I think the studio from time to time would have downtime. No studio is going to be 24/7, always packed. So I wanted to activate the downtime by bringing in artists to write and produce and have A&R put ears on that music so as to fully maximize it if possible.
That's fantastic. Let's move forward to Los Angeles. For somebody who's, who grew up in Memphis and spent such a large amount of time in New York, what was that transition like for you to come to Los Angeles? Very different culturally, environmentally, everything, the weather, earthquakes.
Yeah, it was a breeze. It's like walking, Like, if you can spend time in New York, you can make anything work. And I think I always knew that and had an appreciation for that. But once I moved out to LA is a very easy city to navigate. Geographically, it's very diverse across neighborhoods and even across counties. Getting to know all the individual cities, they all have something going on. And these days, even if you don't have a car, you can get around pretty good because the transit system has gotten a lot better. And the buses are effective. They're kind of slow, but they'll get you where you need to go. So I think it's fairly easy to navigate because you just kind of get in your car and go where you need to go. And it's not as rambunctious as New York. New York is just the lifestyle in New York just takes more out of you. It doesn't matter your socioeconomic level. The lifestyle is just a lot more difficult. The weather is very taxing, and there's just so much required to do every small thing. So LA takes a lot of the labor out of regular everyday tasks, and that energy can be placed back into the art or back into whatever is actually advancing you as a human being or advancing you as a professional. And I like that. I like getting literally hours back. I'll give you an example, like a small example is laundry. Like when I was living in New York, laundry may take, all day to do, depending on how much I had to do, because you got to walk to the laundromat and you got to do this and you got to do that and you got to go to the ATM and get coins and you got, you know what I mean? Like, but it's like pretty standard in LA for people to have in-unit laundry.
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like such a small thing, but it's, when you think about it, if there are 10 small things like that you don't have to think about anymore, because they've been so dramatically simplified, then that's a lot of additional energy that can be now redirected to whatever. And that's what I found. I've been collecting all of that additional kinetic energy that I would be putting somewhere else, and I've been putting into my art and my music. And I think it's really paid off.
Yeah, instead of sitting at the laundromat all day waiting for your clothes to dry.
Walking back and forth to the laundromat. It's just a lot easier.
And then add weather elements into that equation. It starts to get a little nutty.
The weather's the best part.
Oh, yeah. I'm in Northern California, so I'm right there with you in terms of, the weather and what we have out here. All those people that think California sucks, I'm like, yeah, keep thinking that.
Yeah, don't come out here. It's fine.
It's terrible. Terrible place. Don't come out here.
That's right.
Well, so your time at Atlantic in Los Angeles, has the job role shifted even more since New York?
1,000%. So I just released a poetry album on the label a couple weeks ago that I A&R'd. I produced the whole thing. I mixed the whole thing. I played most of the instruments. I'm doing the Atmos mixes as well for it, and spearheaded it, right? It was my brainchild. I put the proposal and the deck together. I took it to Julie Greenwald. We got it greenlit, right? So that's very unique. And the company put it out and wanted me to be the artist, essentially. So it's a compilation album. I'm not really on it as the artist. There are a lot of different artists that are on it. But like the fact that they would want me to be kind of the face of it, to drive it, I mean, it's very unique. That's not how labels typically work with the folks who work with them. If everybody working at a label could just release an album on the label, I think there'd be a lot more people trying to work for labels. But it's because of the rapport that I've established over a long period of time, the trust that I've established, and also the quality of the projects that I bring to the table. I think the company has been a lot more willing to allow me to use its resources to push forward a vision.
You have a lot of talents and a lot of experience and knowledge that cover, not only just the, songwriting, engineering, producing, marketing. You kind of see the ecosystem as a whole, but can identify all the individual elements in the ecosystem. It seems that in this day and age, that is a set of talents that can be pretty advantageous to the individual to know all that. And I'm wondering if those different elements, based on your experience, influence one another. Like does the marketing ever of anything ever start to get thought about in the mixing or the production, or is your brain firing on all cylinders thinking of these things?
Yes, that's the short answer. I would like to preface what I'm going to say to answer your question more directly, something that's a bit of a precursor to what I want to say, which is you have to. This is not, the music business, unfortunately, is not like the other industries. No one expects LeBron James to sell his own tickets to his games and to run the concession stand and to film the game for broadcast and to also be able to play in the game and to coach the team, right? But that's what's required of musicians. We're required to wear every hat. And it's becoming so critical. We have to put our own team together. We have to run that team, manage that team. The lawyer, the publisher, the manager, the social media person, whoever's doing that for you, your videographer, that's your team. We're responsible for being the main player and the coach at the same time. You have to manage your finances, having your LLC set up, having your business set up, all that. You have to be on top of that. You have to be on top of every potential stream of income that exists out there, depending on all the various roles that you play. You have to then also make the music, be good at recording the music. Then you also have to figure out how to market the music, because no one's going to do that for you. It really comes down to if you want to be successful or not. And because I said a long time ago I wanted to be successful, I had to learn a lot of skills. And fortunately, I've gotten a chance to learn most of them on the job. Some of them were intuitive for me, and it was pretty, for example, I mentioned before that the instruments came fairly easy, and, the songwriting and the engineering stuff came a little harder. I really had to work for the engineering and learning how to do it. Production, I had to work for that. Studying lots of records, working with lots of producers who were a lot better than me, working with engineers that were a lot better than me, and just soaking up everything from everybody. And like I said, because I worked at Atlantic, I got a chance to do all this learning on the job. And the marketing has come out of necessity. It was originally not something that I thought very much about. Once I realized it is 100% a necessity, I started teaching myself how to do it. And so now I think all the time about marketing my music and how to actually make it connect and how using authenticity can assist with that. And so, of course, while I'm making the music, the ideas will start to rattle off. Some of them, anyway, will start rattling off, and I'll start to do a little work. But one of the things I've learned is that you can't do everything all at the same time. So when I'm making a record, I'm making a record. I'm not trying to market it at the same time. I'm planting necessary seeds. With this last record that I put out, I'll be honest with you, I wish I had started on the marketing a little earlier. Because you always want to be thinking about it on some level, because the more runway you have, the better. The 6 months of runway, to me, is like gold. And if you have more than that, but 6 solid months is like gold. So if I have 6 months to be prepping marketing materials and having those necessary conversations, because I think what also helps with marketing is the personal touch, the one-to-one. If you can get on the phone with the publicist, if you can, and really share that vision, if you can be meeting folks at the DSPs and sharing the vision. I had an opportunity on this last release, build a really great rapport with Apple. And they were like on board a year in advance. And we would have meetings like early, before the music was done. I don't even think I had anybody recorded yet. And I was going in there just pitching them on the vision. And then they felt a part of it. at the end when they heard it and completed, and they were just like, we've been along this journey. I think one of the marketing executives at Apple said to me, I can finally hear what's been in your head for all these months. That was like the greatest compliment to me. But we had been establishing a rapport. So in a way, it's never too early to start having marketing conversations. But a rollout, I feel like, needs to have its own space. And the making of the record needs to have its own space. On this last record, I had cameras following me around from time to time in a few sessions just for documentation. I didn't know what I was going to do with the footage.
Content creation after the fact?
Exactly. It didn't click what to do with the content until the record was finished. But I grabbed it, At the beginning, I felt like, I'm just grabbing this for documentation. Like, I might not even use this. It's just kind of like archival. But once the album was over, I was like, oh, eureka, this is what I should do with that. So you might not know, like, doing some things preemptively is always good, but it's also great to like just lock yourself away. I mean, in my opinion, I can't speak for other artists, but I like being locked away and working on my record. And when it's time to actually promote it, I'll go out and start building my rollout.
And I think what you're saying too is really important. Even on the indie level, producers, engineers, those making records where there's more of a DIY element and not a major label behind it, this concept of content capture, you never know what you're going to do with it, as you say. But in the end, when we're talking about, promotion and social media, it's like, man, it really just super duper important to have that and to be able to utilize that content to promote the album.
Because you just never know what people will be gravitating. And also it's a great, especially for producers and engineers, it's a really great way to document your journey as an artist and to see where you were and where you've come. I was going back looking at some old content I did about 7 years ago. And I was thinking about where I was then and where I am now is worlds apart in a good way. And as we're always striving to get to the next thing, it's really great to be able to look back and say, I've come so far and I know so much more and I'm so much better, right? At that point, I was marketing something that I was releasing independently. Now I'm releasing, my last 3 releases have been on major labels. So I was trying, in that content specifically, I was trying to get to the point I am at now. So and hopefully in another like 5 years, I'll look back and be like, wow, like I'm really light years away from where I was. And I can always just appreciate the journey. And I tell people all the time, I try not to think of it as content as much as it's an opportunity to have a conversation with a potential audience or with the public, because it's a conversation that is really going to determine whether or not the marketing materials are successful. Are you starting a conversation? Are people able to have commentary? Are they able to participate? Is it striking some sort of chord? That's really the question.
I have such an appreciation for how focused and just like passionate you are about what you're doing. And that's inspiring to me. And what I'd like to know is where are the challenges for you? Where do you feel like, oh God, this is hard? Or the struggle, like where have the struggles been?
Well, I mean, that's its own podcast, and thank you for asking me those questions because they exist in so many different areas, right? So there's obviously, and I'll name a few, there's always a new musical challenge. There's always something from a compositional perspective that I can be better at. And I'm always trying to chip away at an inefficiency or a deficiency. Every day I'm practicing for hours on end and asking the questions, can I beat yesterday? And if you say that in enough days in a row, I look back in a year and I'm light years away from where I was. And so the musical challenge is always there. It's always looming. There's always some skill that I've yet to perfect that I need to chip away at on the piano or on the guitar. It's just some hole in my knowledge base that I want to close up, because as a musician and as a producer, the best gift I can give myself is freedom. Just the freedom to express a musical idea with little to no interference, because then I can allow the spirit to lead me when I'm in a studio with an artist, or even if I'm alone, I can just allow those ideas to easily filter without any interference. And so I'm always chasing proficiency so that I can be in that type of position at all times. Apart from musical challenges, there's a challenge of the business. There's so much uncertainty in the music business, right? And it's not a meritocracy at all. It's not like sports. If you're better than everybody, and better can be quantified very, very easily, you can just rise to the top. If you beat everybody enough times, you can win a championship. It's not like that in music. So you have to navigate an industry with a product that's so subjective and with metrics that are sometimes elusive. And there's not a ton of clarity even around performance of your product in the marketplace, apart from the reaction of the public. And it's a corporate business. It's a corporate business whose main product is the intellectual property of individuals, and specifically of artists. So navigating that as a creative who is business-minded, but I'm still an artist at the end of the day, navigating that is hard. Making peace with that is hard. Making peace with the relationship between art and commerce in the music business, and how to navigate that as an artist, right? Understanding that this is what I do first and foremost is service, and attempting to be a good steward of my art is important to me, but I'm also contributing to a much larger ecosystem that has economic infrastructure that may or may not be advantageous depending on who you are, what you produce, what you create, and the politics of that. So, that's hard. It's hard as hell. Like really trying to make sense of how artists get treated in this business, especially engineers, especially producers, especially songwriters, who are essential to the first step in the supply chain. So that's tough, and advocating for women is another thing that has been challenging. And I've dedicated a lot of my time to. It's actually a legitimate second job for me, but it's not something that I feel I can overlook over the course of my journey. But managing that has been a challenge because I have to do a very unique balancing act. But, advocating for women so that their journey can be a little easier than perhaps mine has been is also a challenge. So there are lots of challenges in different areas, but, through my faith and through the support of my ecosystem and the people around me who have been very generous with time and money and resources, like the folks at the Recording Academy and the folks at Warner Music Group, I've been able to kind of make it work, but it hasn't been easy.
So you have a lot of experience in as I mentioned earlier, and as you've explained clearly in all these different roles. Being that my audience is primarily comprised of audio professionals, can you, with your perspective and the 30,000-foot view, I think that you're able to have, because you've been an artist, you've dealt in all these different areas, including engineering, mixing, producing. What is your advice to audio professionals, like on the ground engineers in the trenches, who are, whether they're recording or mixing, what do you think they need to keep in mind in this day and age in the world of music to survive? Like, what's an observation or series of observations you have and advice?
I would like to say something that I think could work across disciplines and like across levels, right?
Okay.
Be administratively proficient. One would be surprised how much work you get when you're fast and when you are organized and when you are easy to work with because you're organized.
Mm-hmm.
You know how to label files properly. You know how to send revisions, little things like that, like small things. Use a content and file management system. Don't be emailing MP3s to people.
Yeah.
Like make it easy, you know. Also research, administrative savvy also has a lot to do with just kind of academic approach to what you do, studying, whatever you're trying to do, studying it, and ad nauseum daily, like make it a daily pursuit. Take notes when people of repute talk to you, and also pick the people to follow, to read and to study, and do it every day, right? Like do it every day, like whatever it is, do it every day.
Okay.
You know,
I like that. And what you're not directly saying, but I'm picking up is, in spite of your experience, continue it as a daily practice.
Every day. It has to become religious on some level. And I mean religious in the sense of almost like, in the sense of you do it like you brush your teeth.
Yeah.
Or you do it like you take a shower. Right? It's interesting to me. A lot of people don't think they're religious. We all have something we do religiously every day.
Yeah.
Putting on shoes, you know, eating, sleeping. Just build it into that list of things you do every day.
It's part of the routine. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I love what you're saying about being organized administratively. Can you cite other specific examples administratively that you're thinking about?
I think administrative savvy comes into a couple of different spaces. And I think the more important ones are when it comes to payments and processing, for example, like invoicing, knowing how to do that, knowing how to do your taxes properly, knowing also how to do your W-9s and your 1099s and all your tax forms and everything, making sure that is organized and clear. So like there's like the payment side of things. And then there's also just dealing with clients, like knowing how to communicate via email, knowing how to communicate via phone and via text, and knowing which is appropriate when. Like, depending on who you're dealing with, you might not want to call at 2 a.m. Depending on who you're dealing with, you might want to call at 2 a.m., right? It depends on knowing your client, knowing how they communicate. Some clients don't want to receive a 10-page email. Some clients would love to receive a 10-page email, right? Like understanding what form of communication works for your client and being as efficient through that means of communication as you can possibly be. So that falls under just like comms. And then you have another type of administrative savvy, which is just like know where your stuff is at. Like you're in the studio with an artist and they want you to pull up the session from last week that had that ting-ting sound in it, you need to know exactly what they're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the session with the ting-ting and the boom-boom. Okay, yeah, I got you. Last Thursday, yeah, I'm pulling it up now. You know where your files are, and and they've been properly labeled. You know, you're not opening up your sessions with all the files gone because you moved something from some other hard drive. And then I left my other hard drive that has the sounds at home. Like, no. Like, you're shooting yourself in the foot before you even get started. And you might be a really great engineer and a really great producer, but you're not organized. People are waiting on you to get to the session. If the session starts at 8, you're there at 7:30. That's how that works. if the session ends at 9, you leave at 10. That's how that works. You don't leave when the artist leaves. You got stuff to do. You got to put the bounces together. You got to wrap up the mixes. You got to talk to your engineers before you leave and like get clear with them. You got to do your split sheets. It's like, it's a business. And funnily enough, the people that float to the top, enjoy being at the top and stay at the top are the people who have it together on the fronts that have nothing to do with the actual music. They've taken some time to understand the business. And also, as far as administrative, I would say like the business admin, understand how producer deals work, know what your options are as an engineer. Should you ask for points? Should you not ask for points? If you wrote with an artist and you also produced an engineer, guess what? You get publishing. Like understanding like how the publishing side of the business works, how it is different from the recording side of the business, understanding all your rights in terms of your performance royalties, your mechanical royalties, understanding your broadcast and sync royalties. These are all different areas of the business, but they all will determine whether or not you're eating or starving.
You could have taken this path of being a doctor, but you've taken all of the seriousness and discipline that one would apply in that field to this business. It's very clear to me how you operate. I'm going to call you when I need advice.
Stop.
Yeah. That's,
Thank you.
Wow. There's just like 1,000,001 quotes you just laid out right there for me.
No problem. Thank you for asking that question.
In the world of audio, when dealing with audio now, do you feel like you've transcended your interest in audio, or is it still there? And if so, what avenue in audio do you prefer? Mixing, recording, does that still drive you?
I love audio. I was just thinking, I think I was just in the studio and I was doing a very simple task and I wasn't getting any sound out of a UAD Apollo interface. Mm-hmm. And I was struggling with trying to figure out how to route some outputs. And I just remember thinking, oh no, I'm slipping. Because they used to call me the queen of the studio in New York because it was just no problem too big, no problem too small, just call Ebonie, she'll come in here. And I just remember thinking, oh no, because I'm not engineering enough. Because after I finished the record, the one that I just turned in, mm-hmm. I didn't want to see another studio for a while. So I just got really focused in on, just composition. And I've been really focused in on composition for some months now and taking a little bit of a break because I did 2 albums back to back this year. So I had one come out in April, another one come out in August. And it was just kind of like, okay, I just need a little bit to catch but now I'm kind of like missing being in the studio every day. Mm. And I just hate this idea of not being good at audio because I think it's one of the things that honestly gives me the edge in that I'm a songwriter that's also an excellent engineer, that's also an excellent producer. And I want to keep that edge. Audio is fascinating to me, down to the science of it, just the basic conception of, from an electronic perspective and an electrical perspective, how we have managed to coerce these electrons into doing our bidding. That's in the analog space, which is already genius enough. Mm-hmm. And then you take it to the digital space, which is figuring out how to digitize electric current and how to use postcode modulation to actually re-engineer or to reproduce acoustical information inside of a computer. And still using electricity, but just in a different way. And the art of that, there's so much artfulness and so much creativity. And what I love also is that the industry is pretty much built on each subsequent generation of audio engineers and audio scientists trying to figure out how to one-up the previous generation. I love that as an end user, I get to enjoy these products that have been built and to get to learn about that world through them. And so in terms of the next phase for me, I would like to always continue engineering. I'm always going to engineer my own records. I'm always going to record my own records. Whether or not I want to be Taylor Swift's full-time engineer, I don't know. I mean, if the job came up, I might take it. Right? It might mean that I can't do as much of my own stuff, but that would be a pretty cool freaking job to have. Laura Sisk is occupying that position right now, but it sounds like I think I don't know. It would have to be something like that for me to go back into probably being like a full-time engineer. Because I'm really enjoying producing and composing. But I love that space.
You multitask quite a bit.
Yeah, it's kind of like I said before, I don't know that it's kind of a necessary thing because number one, I don't have the luxury to wait on other people. That's what got me into engineering in the first place. And the second thing is nobody's going to do it like me.
That's right.
I need to be in complete control of my full signal chain, right? Like from inception to mastering, I need to know what's going on because no one's going to do it like I can do it. I'm going to bring a perspective. Once I'm through breaking all the rules, it's going to sound like me.
That's fantastic. Well, we are at a time, and I will include in the show notes a link to your website and any other links that you feel relevant. But I really want to thank you. I really appreciate your time. The things that you've laid out have been very inspirational to me. Every time I talk to a guest, and you are no exception, I get inspired, and you've inspired me today. So thank you for that.
No problem. And, thank you for having me. It's a wonderful platform you built.
Well, thank you. All right, Ebonie, at some point we'll meet in person, but until then, you take care.
All right. Thank you so much.